everyone, I'm back with another in the series of Fallen Angels. You'll notice that there's only 2 cards this time instead of 3. I found that there was not this particular entity in the Fallen Angels Oracle. What I've been finding is that the Fallen Angels Oracle is drawing from a different text besides the Lesser Key of Solomon. It was a later text. A French text, and so most of the fallen angels match, but some of them don't. And so for this one, they do not have one for Vassago. And so I'll be just talking about these 2 particular cards. Now, Vassago, I looked up, and he is described very much as being like Aguirre's in appearance. Last week's fallen angel was, an older man who was seen riding a crocodile with a falcon on his arm, and this one is described exactly the same way. And so you can see here in the Goetia tarot, they've drawn him. This time he's walking the crocodile. And you don't see the falcon anywhere. So you see that he's walking, and he appears blindfolded, which I'll talk about in a sec. And then this one, the drawing they have is not one from the Dictionary Infernal. I think it's one that they may have made up themselves or found from another source. And so this one has him associated with the tower, and I don't think that that is appropriate for this particular entity, and I'll explain why in a minute. But you'll see they've got kind of this skull on top. I wonder if this is supposed to be a crocodile or something on top of a tower. All right, so Vassago's described looking very much like Aguirre's, but he is described as sort of the entity in charge of divination, that he can see the past, the present, and the future, and give magicians answers about that, as well as being able to find lost objects. He's described as being very helpful as well, and being able to find things that have been, lost, being able to give information, and so he's seen as a very helpful spirit and very benevolent as well. So they depicted him with a blindfold here because it shows that the information he gives is not influenced by other things around it. He gives very straightforward answers. He's apparently known to be quite straightforward with things and very informative. So I didn't see like a lot of negative things for sure. I actually described him as being a very positive, helpful spirit. I think it's interesting that he is associated, very much looking like a Vassago. And so you wonder if these 2 entities somehow were split at one point into two different ideas. I have no idea, but it's interesting that they're described the same way. And so, this author drew them somewhat similar with a slight variation, whereas this is completely different. For this one in the Occult Tarot, they associate him with the Tower. And it says here, promoter of discord, war, arguments, and falsehood, gives generous responses. Now, gives generous responses is the only thing that matches with the research that I did. The first part there does not seem to match this particular entity at all. Now, for this one, they associated him with the 4 of Wands, which I would say is actually probably quite appropriate because the 4 of Wands has to do with stability. It has to do with celebration. It has to do with celebrating life, celebrating order. And while, he's not exactly about celebration, I could see putting him as a 4 because he seems to be a very stable type of spirit. Here they have him associated with the planet Jupiter and the sign of Aries. So there is that fiery sort of element, Jupiter for luck and benevolence. So I can see where some of these associations for this particular entity may have come from. So in doing research about him, he's said to be the Prince of Jinnistan. And Jinnistan is a mythological place. It is the land of the jinn, or what we sometimes call genies, but in Arabic sort of folklore and mythology. And I'm not an expert on this, so if anyone, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't want to insult anyone. But for the little bit of research I've done, like the jinn are these entities that are very tricky. They give you what you want, but there's a price for them. And so people often associate them with demons. But he's considered the prince of the land of the jinn. And so you can see, you know, people can ask him a question, and maybe they get the truth that they didn't want to hear, or they find something, a lost object, a lost treasure they've been looking for, but maybe that comes with, you know, some consequences they didn't think of. So I can see where the association is there as well. And again, you can see this theme continuing on, that a lot of these fallen angels are drawn from, you know, legends, from folklore, particularly from the Middle East. And so these spirits that are localized spirits have been essentially demonized. And so this one, I didn't find, you know, a lot of negative about him. He is considered, you know, an expert diviner. A very stable type of force. And so, you know, I didn't see anything particularly negative. Now, the one very negative thing I found, which has nothing to do with this particular entity in itself, I don't think, but there was a famous vampire killer murder that happened in Florida back in, I think it was 1998. And this young man, he became obsessed with Vampire the Masquerade. I don't know if anyone knows about that particular live action roleplay game. I knew people who were really into it, and they were just like obsessed with their character. It was kind of silly in my opinion, but you know, whatever. I'm not against LARPing or anything, you know, as long as people don't get carried away. But this guy got really carried away, and he named his vampire character after Vassago, so that was his vampire character. And he plotted with another boy and a young lady to murder her parents. So very sad. He beat them to death with a crowbar. Very awful, and he's now serving life in prison. So that was the other thing I found associated with this name, which is obviously very negative. But this young man took this name, applied it to himself, and his signature mark was he would burn people with a V, and he was kind of running this vampire cult in a way. He had like these people with him, and they were just like obsessed with vampires and stuff. So make of that what you will, but that is one of the things I found in association with this particular name. But the descriptions of the entity itself seem to be like he's just an expert diviner and can find lost things. So I found it, you know, interesting still doing the research. I wish that they would describe him a little bit differently, because it seems hard to differentiate between Aguirre's and Vassago as far as what they look like. I do appreciate that this artist here did try to make it a bit different. This, though, doesn't seem to have anything to do with him at all, I have to say. So that's our entity for the week. Next week, we'll be moving on to number 4, which I believe is Gamagan. And we'll continue through the series. It's an interesting learning experience, and I hope that you're enjoying it. And as always, peace and love.